Hello, my name is Sheida K. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Kansas, and this is one of my first year research endeavors in the doc program. So this research is a literature review of goal setting interventions. So specifically, I was interested in goal setting because my area of interest is self-determination, and one component of self-determination is goal setting. So goal setting involves creating a target plan or an action to accomplish or attain a desired outcome. So there's simple goals that a person might choose. So, like having lunch in a day or hanging out with friends. And then there's also complex or difficult goals. So, getting to college, or for a lot of high schoolers, it's being an NBA player. So trying to figure out how do we teach students to set their goal is kind of the first step that we can to figuring out how we can actually achieve them. So the steps identified in goal setting means selecting a goal to target, setting a desired level of achievement, and plan acts in service of the goal. So they're all kind of involved in goal setting. So historically, goal setting in learning environments has been associated with social learning theory, which has kind of said that behavior is learned from the environment through observational learning. However, this is something that has somewhat been changed a little bit through recent analyses of human agentic theory, which say that a person is not just observing their environment, but they're actually an active contributor to the things that are happening in their environment. So they are an active contributor through acting in goal-directed and self-regulated planning to navigate through these different actions to get to their goals. So it's not that a person is just learning. Goal setting is in observing something, that they actually have to contribute. So my questions when it came to this literature review was, with whom, in what context, and how have educational practices to promote goal setting been demonstrated in the literature? What are the frequently included components of teaching goal setting that result in increased goal setting in practice? So I looked at peer-reviewed articles in a variety of databases, and I also used a thesaurus function in one of the databases to identify additional search terms, which kind of led me to these 8 search terms. I also included a second phase of the search, which was an ancestral search of relevant literature reviews that kind of talked about different reviews of self-determination literature. And then the inclusion criteria was that it needs to be an empirical research-based study, publication in a peer-reviewed journal. Subjects included were individuals with disabilities, but were not exclusive to individuals with disabilities. And the primary intervention component or independent variable was goal setting. So this limited the scope a little bit because I was really looking at just articles, just studies that the primary intervention component was goal setting. Oftentimes it's a package where goal setting is a component within it, but I was really looking at specifically just goal setting. So conceptually, this is kind of what we're looking at. If we're looking at goal setting, so what are the strengths and needs of the individual supports, the context, the environment, the opportunities, and the instruction? What are the practices and the implementation within them? So I thematically sorted the information, so based on conceptual framework factors, so talking about the different strengths and support needs of the individuals, the different participants, the setting of the intervention, the context, the description of the primary intervention, including length, was a big part of it as well, because that varied quite a bit. Based on the inclusion criteria, 20 articles were identified with an average sample size of 20 participants. Almost half were published in the last 11 years, and the majority utilized a single subject design, which is frequent of special education research because of the smaller sample sizes. The results indicated that majority of interventions were implemented with students with learning disabilities as a primary diagnosis, which is an interesting finding, but it also doesn't bode well for our students in other disability categories. Goal setting interventions were most likely to occur in the classroom setting and not necessarily in community-based or anything like that. And also, as it pertains to the setting, they are more likely to be in an inclusive setting if they were in an elementary setting for younger participants, and more likely to be in a segregated or one-on-one setting if they were going to be with secondary education students. So that's also an interesting finding as well, something that's a trend in literature. intervention components varied, but these ones were the ones that repeated the most across articles. So goal self-selection, so the distinction between the goal being selected by the student themselves or being selected by a teacher, a paraprofessional, a parent, an IEP team. Self-regulated strategy development, so that's actually using like another model in order to goal set. So that was a package that they used, that the primary intervention was goal setting. And then help recruiting training. So this is something that occurred within the same research team, but really kind of finding others to come help you set a goal. So, asking for support from your teachers, from your parents, from your peers to kind of inform your decision-making process. So these were the components that were the most prevalent amongst articles that had increased outcomes in goal setting. So the implications of kind of looking at the who and the where and the how this research has occurred suggests that we need to further examine them for different environmental settings and opportunities, especially as we kind of make this shift into inclusive practices. We really need to understand goal setting within these new environments with also diverse participants. So like I said, primarily the diagnosis was learning disabilities, but we really need to look at a wide variety of individuals with differing support needs and strengths and areas of need. And lastly, we need to look at more instructional practices. So these are only 3 different components, but what we know is that in order to teach a complex skill like goal setting, we need multiple, methods, or we need to explore different ways that we can kind of teach this thing that'll work for different students. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.